back to headlines now. Advocates belonging to various associations today boycotted courts to protest at the proposed Legal Practitioners Act 2010. But such a united face of advocates has now raised several questions.
The central government's proposal to constitute a legal services board under the Legal Practitioners Act 2010 is seen by advocates as a threat. They say existing regulations are enough.
இந்த சட்டம் தேவையற்றது. இந்த சட்டம் வழக்கறிஞர்களுக்கு எதிரானது.
The Madras High Court's order to suspend the Tamil Nadu Bar Council chairman Chandra Mohan for attempting to influence a judge appears to underline the need for stringent regulations. But advocates say the act would suppress their voice.
And apart from that, they are trying to thwart the voice of a democracy. It is a draconian act, and they are going to introduce, contrary to the act which stands in the earlier, the Advocates Act, they are trying to do. For that, we are going for abstaining the court today, and then we are going to strong agitation in future also.
The show of unity by the advocates is not a surprise. Who in a free country would want more regulatory mechanisms? In Chennai with Peer Mohammed, Jay Santosh for Ndtv-Hindu.
Well, moving to news from the districts of Trichy now, an AIADMK Manachannalur local secretary was stabbed to death today. Unidentified men slashed him to death early this morning and fled the scene. The motive of the murder remains unknown. Witnesses found the secretary's body, and as of now, the body has been sent for post-mortem, and the DIG of the area is currently probing the case. Well, in some national news now, the BJP and the left have slammed the Environment Minister for saying that India can look at legally binding emission cuts in the future. Accusing Jairam Ramesh of exceeding the mandate given by the Parliament, the opposition parties are demanding that the government explain Jairam's statement in Cancun. The BJP says Jairam has acted unilaterally and the government must come clean on this. So far, India has maintained that while it will make all efforts to cut back on greenhouse gas emissions and even report about this to its own parliament, these would be voluntary. India has always maintained that it cannot take on emission cuts as this will impact the pace of eco-development. The US has been putting pressure on India and China to take on legally binding cuts. It's also used this as an excuse, in fact, not to sign up on legally binding cuts, saying that both the fast-growing economies are also increasing their gas emissions.
That's nothing but the foot-in-the-mouth disease. What Jairam Ramesh told here was different than what he's telling there. And again, every time he is twisting and he's changing his statements, this is going to harm the country's interests. And the way he is presenting India's case there is simply self-defeating.
Position of the Indian delegation Cancun, led by Jairam Ramesh, in which they have succumbed to the pressure primarily by the US-led developed countries to agree to legally binding limitations on emissions, can be described only in two words. This is a sellout, and it's extremely unfortunate that this should have happened. We strongly condemn it, and we demand that the government should come clean on this issue.
Meanwhile, Jairam Ramesh has on his part justified what he calls a nuanced shift in India's goalpost, saying that India should not be isolated in the international community and that this is in India's interests.
We are not the bad guys. Yeah. That's very important for India not to be isolated in any of these international forums, you know. Yeah. And we have larger stake in the world economy today than we had, say, perhaps 25 years ago. Right. So, and negotiations is all about flexibility. Yes. Negotiations is all about seeing what is happening and responding creatively. I think, frankly, I have not changed the goalpost. I've nuanced our position. Our position remains, let me say, yes, we will not accept a legally binding agreement at this stage. Yes. Because A, we don't know what is the content of this legal agreement. B, we don't know what the penalties of non-compliance are, and 3, we don't know what the system of monitoring these legal obligations.
Well, in some news from the capital now, it's an all-out war between the opposition and the government over the Justice Patil panel. The BJP has threatened to take action against the Telecom Minister Kapil Sibal for announcing an inquiry outside Parliament at a time when Parliament is in session, calling it a breach of privilege. But the minister says it is the opposition that is not allowing the smooth functioning.
General practice is not to make any announcement regarding any policy when the Parliament is in session outside the Parliament.
Mr. Shah, also, do you think the fact that he's talking about a probe from 2001 brings the NDA and the BJP also
whatever he can talk is a different thing. We don't accept all that. But the question is that the manner in which he announced it is highly objectionable and may invite privilege.
Are you worried that he's the BJP? And
I'm not at all worried. Our party is not at all worried about it.
Not only does the law of parliamentary privileges for the BJP mean the privilege to obstruct parliament, but it also means the privilege to obstruct running my ministry. I wish the leader of the opposition had been more thoughtful and circumspect when he enunciated the law of parliamentary privileges. For one's vision should not be blurred in enunciating the law when one is obsessed with politics.
In other news, while the opposition's slamming the government for announcing a probe into the 2G scam from 2001 without going through the parliament, the man who will head the investigations is gearing up for a tough task. Retired Supreme Court Judge Shivraj Patil has been asked to probe spectrum allocation policies from 2001 to 2009 and file a report in 4 weeks' time. NDTV's Vasanthi Hariprakash caught up with him in Bangalore before he left for the capital.
The man who's been given the task of telling the people how spectrum was given, how 2G licenses were allocated, now joins us. Justice Shivraj Patil, thanks so much for speaking to NDTV, sir. But you've been given only a month's time to go into the entire gamut of 2G spectrum allocation. Is that enough time for you?
I must make one or two things clear to you before I answer this question. Firstly, the entire, or rather all aspects of this spectrum are not before me. Although I do not have the terms of reference in front of me now, I have not received the terms of reference yet. But broadly I was given to understand that I have to look into the procedural aspects, namely whether the appropriate procedures were followed in the matter of allocation of 2G spectrum and in the matter of granting licenses. And this is not a commission under the Commission of Inquiries Act. So it's a one-man committee. One-man committee for a specific purpose, and not that all aspects relating to this are to be looked into by me. Second, to your question whether it is possible to complete in 4 weeks' time, I will not be able to say this exactly for the reason that I don't have terms of reference. Unless I look to the terms of reference, I will not be able to say what is the volume of work involved and the nature of work involved.
This is Headlines Now. Still ahead on the bulletin. Looks like the Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg has a lot to give away this Christmas season. Find out what's behind his giving pledge this time around.